Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello students, as we come to the end of this course on modern world architecture, we are on module number 59 or lecture number 59, and today we want to talk about modern to contemporary architects. Now, as I must have mentioned before also, that the two words or terms modern and contemporary mean something slightly different in architecture. When we talk of modern architecture, we refer to the architecture of the earlier 20th century with the coming in of the international style modernism, the works of Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, etc., and the architecture that grew out of it in the 20th century. So much of the 20th century we call as modern architecture or modern world architecture. But from the period of 1990s or 2000s, the architecture of the 21st century is generally called as contemporary world architecture. Now, the two terms in English may be overlapping, but they have a distinct identity in architecture so that we can chronologically place buildings and architects into these categories. Both are important. Over these series of lectures, we have gone through literally tens of buildings designed by these architects, starting from the 18th century, where we studied the laying of the foundation of modern architecture onwards into the 19th and the 20th century. We have studied iconic architects, great architects, we've seen the masters like Frank Lloyd Wright and Corbusier, and we've talked about the latest architects and their works today. Modern architects of the 20th and 21st century, or you can say modern architects or 20th and contemporary architects of the 21st century, has been a journey through visionaries who shaped our built environment. And from modernism to contemporary global architecture, they have played a critical role. Their buildings explore innovation, technology, sustainability, and our cultural identity. The two pictures you see here is that of a modern museum, the Guggenheim in New York by Frank Lloyd Wright, to a contemporary museum, the Guggenheim in Bilbao by Frank Gehry. Why do we need to study modern architects? We've studied modern architecture, but these are the icons behind those iconic buildings. We have Frank Lloyd Wright in the turn of the we can say the very beginning of the 20th century, from 1900s to the 1920s. Then we have Le Corbusier from the 1920s to the 1930s. We have Mies van der Rohe from the 40s to the 60s. Louis Kahn from the 60s and the 70s. Foster from the 80s to the 90s. Zaha Hadid stepping on into the 21st century. And some of the contemporary architects today like Rem Koolhaas, Daniel Libeskind, John Nouvel, and all these series of architects who are working today. Architecture reflects our society, technology and culture. In the 20th century, it was the age of modernism, industrialization and globalization. 21st century is an era of sustainability, digital innovation and diversity. The reason why I have placed this presentation right at the fag end of the series is because the last one, which will be our looking ahead into the world of contemporary architecture, many of the points I am making here, I will again reflect on them with you in the next presentation. For example, the issue of sustainability, digital innovation and diversity. Architects have served as drivers of change or agents of change in urban life, identity and climate response. Some of the key themes that we see as we move from modern to contemporary architecture is form and function. Essentially, modernist principles remain today, but forms today respond to culture, identity and experience. Technology today has become far more dominant in our buildings, so we have moved from concrete and steel, RCC frame construction, steel frame construction, which were vital developments in early 20th century. We are now moving to smart materials and AI design in the early stages of the 21st century. We took it culture and context, then from global styles in the 20th century, we have now moving towards more region specific identities. When we talk of sustainability, there was a focus on passive design or climate responsive design. We saw that particularly with regard to our own modern Indian architects, and you can refer to my series on modern Indian architecture to understand more about that. We are now moving to a world of net zero and green architecture. In the human experience, from monumental modernism, for example, the works of Louis Kahn, to a more user-centered neurodiverse design, a design that is very inclusive and that responds to challenges of a neurodiverse population and diverse identities. There are 5 themes that we would generally cover under modern and contemporary architects. There is technology, and the example for that was Centre Pompidou. There is form, and that cannot be as good an example as Sydney Opera House by Jean Utzon. There is the human experience we find in the Haider Aliyev Center by Zaha Hadid. There is sustainability in the Bosco Vertical, the vertical forest, and then there is culture that we saw in the Guggenheim in Bilbao. Architects who shaped modern and contemporary architecture, the 20th century pioneers are Frank Lloyd Wright, organic architecture with the works of Falling Water, Guggenheim, New York. Le Corbusier, international style with works like Villa Savoy and the design of Chandigarh. Mies van der Rohe, minimalism and less is more with projects like the Seagram building, the Farnsworth House, the new National Gallery. Louis Kahn from 1901 to 1974, all about monumentality and light like the Salk Institute, the IIM Ahmedabad and the Dhaka Assembly. And those architects who shaped both modern, stepping into contemporary architecture, the 21st century innovators are Zaha Hadid, parametric fluid forms in the Haider Aliyev Center, though I would mention that she actually began in deconstructivism, and we have seen that when we were talking of the series deconstructivism. Norman Foster, of course, related to high-tech architecture, also to sustainability, energy efficient buildings like the Gherkin, the Apple Park. Santiago Calatrava, sculptural expressionism, buildings are sculptural, engineering driven forms like the Turning Torso, the City of Arts and Sciences, the other buildings that we saw like the Milwaukee Art Museum. Shigeru Ban, whose works we saw just a couple of presentations, or the last presentation was about humanitarian architecture, paper tube structures, etc. From modernism to the 21st century, it's all about continuity and transformation. 20th century pioneers laid the foundation all about function, form, technology and global modernism. There is no doubt in my mind that the impact of the modernists was revolutionary, coming out from the architectural confusion of the industrial revolution period, which we termed as the architectural predicament, coming to the nature based architecture of Art Nouveau, still not completely out of historical forms and buildings that couldn't fully understand or respond to an industrial society, to modernism that appeared to be the spot on answer for an industrial society. So their contribution is immense. And even in our buildings today, which are radical in form and radical in technology, the fundamental modernist principles abide. 21st century architects expanded these ideas with sustainability, digital design and cultural diversity. So they are building on the foundation of the 20th century architects. Those fundamental principles, like I say, they still abide, but they are being built upon. We shifted from machines for living, Le Corbusier's concept, to a responsive human-centered environment. Architects today address climate change, urban density and new technologies like artificial intelligence, parametric design and smart materials. So let's get on with a series of architects from the 20th into the 21st century, and the way I have listed it out is from the year of birth of the architect. We begin with Alvar Aalto. 1898. Now this series is not exhaustive. There are a huge number of architects that I have not been able to cover. There are a whole range of architects that have already covered which are not in the list. For example, Wright, Mies van der Rohe, Corbusier, Walter Gropius, they do not appear in this list today. Those architects who appear in this list are all iconic architects, but like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. Let's start with Alvar Aalto. His architectural studio, Arquitectito Misto, very difficult for me to pronounce, Alvar Aalto, or the Architectural Office of Alvar Aalto. He got the AIA Gold Medal 1963 and the Royal Gold Medal 1957. Very influential modernist architect, but he had a humanistic approach, incorporated organic forms, natural materials, so wood particularly, so associated with Finland, the sense of warmth into his designs, leading to his later works under critical regionalism. We've talked about it before. So example is like the Villa Maria in Finland 1939, which is a modernist design but with Finnish rural elements. So right from the outset, though he was designing under modernism, the one building we saw in detail earlier was the Paimio Sanatorium, which was classic international style building, but the warmth in the building still remained with the design of the rooms, the way he had done it for the tuberculosis patients, the furniture, the way he had designed it so that it would ease their breathing. All of it pointed towards a very human-centered approach. Here he was inspired by local farmhouses but designed with a modern layout. He used a lot of natural materials, particularly wood, for which Finland is known, along with stone and brick. Interior and exterior spaces just flow into each other, which is a very typical modernist concept, but unlike cold modernism, the Villa Maria seems a more lived in, more cozy, more warm space within, particularly because of the extensive use of such materials like wood. Then the Finlandia Hall in Finland in 1971, where he used white Carrara marble, which is very bright, clean look, a symmetrical shape. It's not a regular box as you would find in modernism. And look at this aerial view, you realize the building is full of angles and levels. On the inside, the building changes completely. On the outside, it's very white and sharp. On the inside, very warm wood and soft lighting. It is definitely under the category of critical regionalism. It is modern, even modernist, but feels Finnish. Natural materials and respect of the landscape. So it is a modern Finnish building, as we would say in critical regionalism, a modern Indian building like the works of Charles Correa and B.V. Doshi. Coming to Louis Kahn, whose architectural studio, much more easy to pronounce, Louis I. Kahn Architects, got the AIA Gold Medal 1971, the Royal Gold Medal 1972. He was a towering figure of 20th century architecture with monumental works that blend modernist principles with a timeless, almost ancient quality of like a ruined, long-standing monument. Geometric forms, natural light, material honesty reflect in Salk Institute, in the Sher-e-Bangla Assembly in Dhaka, in the IIM Ahmedabad and other works. We find in the National Assembly or the Sher-e-Bangla Assembly in Dhaka, geometric expressionism. We've already talked about it when we were discussing late modernism. There is massive form surrounded by an artificial lake that provides both cooling and a symbolic separation from the surrounding. There is natural light filtering into the building in the midst of all these geometric forms. There is the use of exposed concrete and stone. Then the Salk Institute, for which he was so famous in 1965, brutalist work but in fine finished exposed concrete. This exposed concrete with teak wood and travertine marble is the material palette. It's modular with an open plan, natural lighting, ventilation and a center water channel. There are a series of pictures of this view which I believe I have shown. They are put together where the different date moment of the day is shown with this view. The interior, some of the shots of the exposed concrete work, the way light and shadow traverses this building. Then we have the Yale University Art Gallery 1953 in the US, open plan with separation of served, that is the galleries, and the servant spaces, the utility spaces. The idea that had come to him in another project about the servant and served spaces is also applied here, and this idea, as you know, we have later on talked about it with regard to high-tech architecture. There is a tetrahedral coffered concrete ceiling in this building, and let us now come to, of course, the projects that I am telling you about these architects is definitely not an exhaustive list. They are just some symbolic works to be able to discuss these iconic architects. Marcel Breuer Architectural Studio, Marcel Breuer and Associates, AIA gold medal, the gold medal of the American Institute of Architects in 1968. Again a major figure in modernist architecture, but he was known both for his furniture and architecture. He designed the iconic Vasily chair. He is an alumni of the Bauhaus. He uses bold forms and modern materials. He designed the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York in 1966. Brutalist with concrete and granite on the outside. It's like an inverted ziggurat which slopes outwards as it rises and feels monumental, challenges typical museum boxes. The facade has this single asymmetrical trapezoidal window on the front, and it's not a transparent facade, it's a boxed in inward looking facade with minimal windows, and so that the focus is inward and on the artwork. So when we go inside, the space is flexible, it's a column free gallery, coffered concrete ceiling with subdued lighting focused on the artwork. Thus, the focus is on the art inside, not on the city outside. And there is the Starkey house he designed in Minnesota in 1955, which is actually a binuclear plan. A similar idea of the binuclear plan or the H plan was there in the Unity Temple by Frank Lloyd Wright, who divided that building into two parts having two separate functions. Here we find it in a house. It's got an open floor plan which is binuclearly divided, integrated in with the site, and it has exposed structural elements and large glass expanses common to modernism, common to the works of architects like Mies van der Rohe, Walter Gropius, Le Corbusier, Alvarado, etc. Charles Eames, and we've talked about Charles Eames when we discussed about the Eames house. This, as we have discussed it in one of the recent previous lectures when I was talking to you about Pierre Koenig's case study houses and about high-tech architecture. I was talking to you how this house was a part of that entire idea coming up of prefabrication and use of factory made components. His architectural studio called the Eames Office. He won the Royal Gold Medal in 1957, not just an architect. Like Marcel Breuer, he also designed furniture, but along with that he was also a filmmaker and an all-around creative mind. He was famous for his contribution to modern furniture design, and like Marcel Breuer, who designed the Vasily chair, he is known for the Eames lounge chair. His iconic work, like I said, is the Eames house in the USA. We will look at one or two other examples. We look at the Entenza house in US in 1962. It's a case study house as a part of the case study house program for modern affordable housing. You know that Pierre Koenig designed 5 houses, and we've looked at case study house number 21, case study house number 22 of Pierre Koenig. 22 is also known as the Stahl house. Here this house is with steel frame, glass panels and modular components, something that was common also for Pierre Koenig's case study houses. And there is floor to ceiling glazing, something akin to the works of Pierre Koenig. Then there is the IBM pavilion that he designed in 1964. It's a tech focused exhibition design. It's a suspended ovoid. What's an ovoid? It's an egg shaped design which is suspended on these columns. And these are these thin steel columns, and there is a use of modular components in this. So this is how the main structure of it looks like. As you step inside, this is what the inside auditorium looks like. It's an information machine. A multi-screen film experience is what you get in the ovoid of the IBM. Let's come to Oscar Niemeyer. Architectural studio is Oscar Niemeyer Architecture Office. He won the Pritzker Prize in 1988. He is one of the most iconic 20th century architects, particularly associated with the modernism in Brazil. Two architects that were very famous in Brazil at the time. One was Lúcio Costa, who was the prominent planner for the capital city of Brazil called Brasilia, and Oscar Niemeyer was, his contribution was the many public buildings that came up in Brasilia, and he, like Corbusier, worked in Chandigarh, Niemeyer worked in Brasilia. And in fact, both of them had close linkages. Finally, that linkage is apparent in the design of the United Nations building in New York, which was primarily a bigger contribution probably with Niemeyer, but Corbusier was also associated with that project. The best known are the civic buildings in Brasilia by Oscar Niemeyer, using very bold and curved forms. He had a very long lifespan, and therefore he worked, his buildings are stretched over a long period of time. But just to look at a couple to give you an idea, the Cathedral of Brasilia in Brazil in 1970, it's a hyperboloid structure which is abstract with minimal ornamentation. It's an exposed structure. As you go inside, you find it's got a glazed roof and diffuse natural light filters into this massive church auditorium. Very similar project was a church designed for the Greek Orthodox Church designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in the United States, which was also a very massive volume. I may be mistaking the name. It's another church building used using a very permeable material, and light filters into that monumental space, works of Frank Lloyd Wright earlier than this project. Then there is extensive daylighting that reduces the reliance on artificial light. These are some of his works in Brasilia. I couldn't, just talk about one, and there are these really magnificent buildings that he has done. There is the National Congress in 1958, the Superior Court of Justice come much later in 1989, the Itamati Palace in 1962, the Palace of Justice in 1962, the Palacio de Alvorada in 1957. Then we have Eero Saarinen. You might recall the name when we discussed about the TWA terminal. We had repeatedly brought it up when we were talking about sculptural expressionism in late modernism. Then later when we were talking about the work of Santiago Calatrava, we compared the Milwaukee Art Museum with the TWA terminal. We compared the Lyon-Setelas railway station of Calatrava with the TWA terminal. Both buildings of Calatrava like bird in flight, and so is the TWA terminal. His architectural firm or studio was known as Eero Saarinen and Associates. He got the AIA gold medal posthumously. In 1962, he was known to be innovative and with sculptural forms. He blended futurism with elegance and he left behind a mark on American modernism. So let's again reflect on the TWA terminal 1962, sculptural expressionism, 4-wing shaped concrete roof. This is the 4-wing shaped concrete roof standing on these Y-shaped piers that you see, which are both the support and the aesthetic part of the building. There are floor to ceiling glass walls, something that was overall the part of modernism. Then there are this integrated curvilinear interior, so the entire language inside and outside is the same, a flowing concrete form. But like I said, this was a custom built airport, something that wouldn't really work today when we talk of airport cities and massive single envelope designs. We've talked about that issue also in context when we were talking about modern airports. Then the MIT Chapel in the USA 1955, it was cylindrical with windowless facade. There is an oculus right at the top of the chapel that brings in light. There is this metal screen that is hanging from the edge of the oculus, and it is surrounded by a concrete moat, a kind of a water body of concrete that you see here all around it. There is an aluminium spire and a bell tower of the chapel. The walls are undulating on the inside, that aids in making it acoustically rich. Then let's come to Japanese architect Kenzo Tange. One of the most famous Japanese architects and one of the most famous modern architects of the 20th century, his firm known as Tange Associates. He also won the Pritzker Prize in 1987. He was a leading figure in modern movement, especially known for blending traditional Japanese styles with modern ideals. His famous projects include the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park and the Yoyogi National Gymnasium, which is a part of the Tokyo Olympics. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum is a post-war reflection of peace and remembrance. You know that Japan is the only country that has ever suffered an atomic attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This building is modernist with an RCC frame raised on pilotis, very similar part of the international style, with glass curtain walls, an open floor plan with ribbon windows. There is a cenotaph for atomic bomb victims, a parabolic arch RCC structure that is placed in front of the building, and you can say it's Corbusian inspired international style that you find in this project. And then there is the Kagawa Prefectural Government Office in Japan in 1958, earthquake resistant 2-story assembly hall that you see here, along with an 8-story tower. There is openness and community access. There is a ceramic tiled mural which has been designed by Kenzo Tange, which is in the building. And then there is the Yoyogi National Gymnasium in Tokyo in 1964, very dramatic sweeping roof. It has suspended by steel cables, large open interior floor spans, expressionist structure with a fusion of modern day engineering and minimalist design. There's a lot of natural ventilation, long lasting structural system, and the space is adaptable to multiple uses. Let's come to our vicinity and talk about one of the most famous architects to come out of South Asia, Geoffrey Bava. Unfortunately, I will not be talking about Indian architects in this series because the whole gamut of Indian architects I have already covered in modern Indian architecture, and you can go back to those presentations to know more about the Indian architects. I'm just covering other global architects in this series. So his architectural studio, Geoffrey Bava Associates, he won the Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 1918, one of the most influential Asian architects of his generation. He pioneered the style that blended modernist principles with local traditions, climate responsiveness and lush green landscape, something which came to be known as tropical modernism. In fact, the term was actually first attributed to Minute de Silva, a Sri Lankan architect who brought it together in her work, and then Geoffrey Bava carried on that legacy. So he designed the Parliament Complex 1982 on an island which is held by retaining walls. It's climate responsive. The main pavilion is flanked by 5 such pavilions, and the main pavilion is aligned to the north-south axis, is connected at the ground and first levels, and thus it resembles like royal palaces. This is the Parliament Complex in Sri Lanka in 1982. Typical part of, either you can call it tropical modernism, but if you want to put it in a more critical category, a more evolved category, then it would fall automatically under critical regionalism. Then there is the Heritage Kandalama Hotel in Sri Lanka in 95. It's a linear terrace plan with green roofs. It's got this living facade, green living facade, singly loaded corridors as you see here. It's got rainwater harvesting, open air circulation, deep overhangs. You would thoroughly enjoy the way the building has been designed in responding to its tropical conditions. Then there is Arata Izuzaki and Associates, Pritzker Prize in 2019. Versatile style evolved over decades. He worked on a wide range of projects, left behind lasting legacy. There is the Oita Prefectural Library in Japan, 1966. This is brutalist modernism, exposed concrete, having a modular structural grid. It is unornamented, has very clean functional clarity as you would expect in a modernist building. The features in the Gunma Museum of Modern Art in Japan include having a cubic geometry or cubic geometries, clear spatial organization, flexible gallery spaces. The modernist traits are there is geometric rigor, there is modularity and adaptability of space. Then we have Michael Graves, we studied him under postmodernism. His architect studio is Michael Graves Architecture and Design. He got the AIA Gold Medal in 2001. Very influential American architect who had a very significant role in postmodernism. Playful and colorful reinterpretation of classical elements. He designed the Hanselmann house in the US. Now I will try to make a course correction here by telling you actually that Michael Graves began as a late modernist. This was his late modern phase in architecture in his early years, and it earlier counted in New York. He was earlier counted with the New York Five, or who were called the Whites, along with Eisenman, Richard Meyer, Charles Gauthame and John Hesdek. We have talked about this earlier. There was white cube massing in this house, very typical of the international style. There is also symmetry and axiality, clean lines, flat roof, minimal ornament, all akin to modernism, in this case falling within the movement that took modernism forward, that is late modernism. There are pure geometric forms. In the Schneiderman house, on the other hand, is a transitional work. Though it is still inspired by modernism, it is still very much a part of late modernism, but some changes start taking place. I will rush you through it. It does have rectangular and cubical forms, it does have symmetry, it is very much a late modernist building, but you find some changes happening here. It appears to be more playful and symbolic. There are arches and notches, and there is the use of color and ornament that begins to emerge in this building. So while it is not fully a postmodern work, but it shows a break is happening in his work from purely white abstraction of his early houses like the Hanselmann house. It is a transitional work which is seen as a turning point in the work of Michael Graves, beginning to reject abstraction in favor of symbolism, memory and a narrative. And the fully mature work then appeared in the Portland building in 1982 and others which we have talked about earlier. Keisho Kurokawa won the Pritzker Prize in 1987, one of the founders of the metabolist movement in Japan. He had a lasting impact, and his iconic works that we have looked at in great length is the Nakajin Capsule Tower in Tokyo. I will not go through these two projects because we have talked about them. The Sony Tower in Osaka as a part of our study of high-tech architecture, in which the concept was the building frame has a longer life and the servant areas are relatively shorter life, so keep the servant areas on the outside. The whole concept of inside out started developing with these kind of projects which were a part of metabolism. So we moving on from the Sony Tower, we come to the Nakajin Capsule Tower, which brought in the idea of the plug-in pod, combination of high-tech principles in this. The apartment pod was designed using those principles, and thus this was one of the early signs of high-tech architectures coming. Then we have Michael Hopkins. He got the Reba Award in 1977, a prominent architect of the high-tech movement known for blending high-tech design with more traditional materials. The Hopkins house in London, designed by him, is made of prefabricated components, extensive glazing, modular with factory-made elements, and it shows a very strong connection with the Patira relocatable building that was designed by Michael Hopkins. You find those same kind of elements in this building also. Jan Kaplicki, we talked about it earlier because he was the one who was contradicting what was being called as high-tech architecture at the time. And he was saying that building to be truly high-tech, it has to use materials from aerospace technology. For example, his architect studio known as Future Systems, he won the Sterling Prize in 1999. His work was futuristic, organic, with innovative use of technology and materials. We've seen a little bit of the media center in the Lloyd's Cricket Ground. This was made using aluminium shell construction, prefabrication and frameless glass. It was use of advanced aerospace and boat building technology through which this building was built. So it was built entirely differently from where the other buildings were being built. The first building in the world which is constructed entirely from shipbuilding methods. And then we have another high-tech architect, Renzo Piano, whose architectural studio known as the Renzo Piano Building Workshop. He won the Pritzker in 1998. He is a strong proponent of high-tech architecture. One of the most important buildings we have studied in the past lectures, Centre Pompidou, designed by piano and Richard Rogers, and it's a radical museum design. We've seen the whole concept of inside out here. And then there is the Shard designed by him in 2012, the tallest building in the UK at 310 meters, having a glass facade which is tapering towards the spire. It's got lightness and transparency, a high-tech idea, sustainability with natural ventilation in double skin facade and energy efficient glazing. Nicholas Grimshaw, again a high-tech architect who won the RIBA Royal Gold Medal in 2019 and known for his high-tech architectural works. Like iconic projects of Nicholas Grimshaw is the Eden project in 1998 in the UK, and then there is the Igus factory and headquarters in 2003, and the Financial Times print works in London 1988. We just glimpsed this building a little while earlier. It's exposed steel structure with large span prefabricated components, steel trusses, large clear spans, all of it based on high-tech architectural ideology. The machinery and functions inside the hall can be easily removed, rearranged or replaced without structural changes. So much a high-tech concept makes the interiors highly adaptable for conversion. The Financial Times print works also shows honesty of materials, functional expression, there is no ornamentation and efficient natural lighting. Moving on to Tadao Ando, another very famous Japanese architect who won the Pritzker in 1995, known for his minimalist concrete structure and masterful use of natural light, iconic work being the Church of Light. We have seen his other work, the small house we saw in the series on Places to Live. This brutalist architecture here is in the rectangular volume which is pierced with a diagonal wall inside it. This you see here in this view, and the light and shadow define the interior. There is both Zen aesthetics from Japanese and Christian symbolism. Then we have Peter Zumthor, who unfortunately we did not go into great detail, but he is a very famous modern day architect. His atelier, Peter Zumthor, won the Pritzker in 2009. He is a Swiss architect and he emphasizes on sensory qualities of materials and spaces, something which is very standout feature of the work of Peter Zumthor. So you might have also seen this work. I would have discussed it before, the Therme walls in Switzerland. It's a public bathhouse which is minimalist, brutalist, using this Walser quartzite as its material. But the most important part is the sensory experience. You can feel it, you can smell it, you can hear it, you can see it. This entire thing is a part of Therme walls. Not only this, the other project, the Saint Benedict Chapel, also has the sensory experience into it. It's a very small project. It's an elliptical boat-like form, minimalist craftsmanship, but it's also the sensory experience is there in the works of Peter Zumthor. This is philosophy of building as a place of quiet and retreat, and that is true for both these projects that I have shown you here. And then there is Jean Nouvel, and he got the Pritzker in 2008, and we've already seen his Arab Institute. The other building that I'll quickly take you through is this Foundation Cartier Pouilly Architect Contemporain. This is a transparent glass facade. It's an amazing building that blurs the boundaries between inside and outside. It's designed to integrate softly with its urban surroundings and garden. And there is double layers of glass, reflections, and very slim structural elements, a sense of weightlessness, a fluid space, blurring between the inside outside takes place in this remarkable building. And then we come to Zaha Hadid, who won the Pritzker in 2004, the first woman to receive it. Highly influential architect for her futuristic designs and her work in parametricism. Legacy of iconic, flowing and dynamic buildings. We have seen this building before, the Vitra fire station in Germany, which was a part of deconstructivism. That is where she began. But when we come to the Maxim Museum in the 21st century in Italy in 2009, this is under parametricism with fluid, concrete and glass forms, interweaving galleries. This is parametric fluidity in this very futuristic concept that you find in this museum. And we end with Kengo Kuma, who was a part of Tange Associates Japan Art Academy Prize in 2024, blending traditional Japanese architecture with modern design sensibilities, as is true for so many Japanese architects. All the ones you've seen here, Kisho Kurokawa, Tadao Ando, Kenzo Tange, Arata Izuzaki, all of them have this merging of Japanese and modern ideologies. The use of natural materials, emphasis on harmonizing buildings with surroundings like the Asakusa Culture and Tourism Center, stacked with simple geometrical form that resemble small houses, glass facade with wooden louvers, having both modernist traits and sustainability like sun shading louvers, natural ventilation and use of local materials. Thus we conclude this series on the set of iconic architects both in the modern era and the contemporary era. I again remind you, this is far from exhaustive. You will come across many more architects that I have not covered who are doing excellent work, and I would really encourage you to study their works too. Thank you.